Hi, welcome. This is Emma and Eleanor, and this is going to be a masterclass around alone in your awakening. What to do when a partner or your family members have a different parenting style, or you are the only gentle parent for your child.
Such a big common concern for people in our
Yeah,
world.
it
Mm,
really is. And it's one of the things that people really come to when they start to wake up around the ways in which they'd prefer to parent differently. I
yep.
know I really resonate with it. I definitely went through this time where I felt like I was going to have to completely go it alone, per
Mm.
se.
Yeah, so this masterclass is really for you if you're one of those parents who you found, it might be simple things like, you might be now aware that you don't want your kids to have so much plastic or so much toys. You might be aware on a consumerist level of that you want to parent differently from the standard. You don't want your kids to have certain toys. You don't want your kids to wear certain fibers. Um, then there might be the relational kind of level where you feel like you don't want your kid, you want to respect your children and you're kind of finding your way with it. And the hardest thing I think for most parents when this is happening is, you might invest, $150 in really beautiful wooden blocks and then the kids go to grandma's and they get Barbies and then they've eaten a whole lot of sugar. And then you find out one of them got timeout for speaking back to someone. And it's like this feeling of it, all of your hard work and effort and conscious, deliberate, intentional parenting feels really undermined. And there's this kind of problem for conscious parents or parents who are kind of have just realized they want to do things differently, that there's this continual feeling of being undermined. There's a feeling of being disrespected. And there's a real feeling of, um, it feels really important. It feels so important. It feels so key that your children are, experience calm, gentle, respectful parenting, or, are environmentally conscious, are conscious of, just conscious living in general, and then the support isn't there. And I think often also because we are, when you're new to this way of parenting and you're reading all the books and you're doing all of the personal work, or maybe you've had an inner child experience of really experiencing the impact that unconscious parenting has on your psyche, your soul, for the whole of your development. Even it can impact us right up until adulthood. Can feel so impassioned about getting it right and doing it differently. And so it can also be not just like annoyingly annoying when you're undermined, but it can feel devastating to have your children not experiencing, life the way you want them to. So
Yeah, and I
this,
feel like the pressure is really on once you start to awaken and you have that awareness shift. Everything becomes much harder to deal with. You're much harder to deal with when your partner is speaking to them in the way in which you wish they weren't, when they're getting the plastic toys, when they're, going to grandma's and sitting in front of a TV for 10 hours.
yep.
Yeah, it can be really painful.
Mm,
So, I just quickly want to introduce ourselves for anyone out there who doesn't know who we are.
mm.
I am Emma, and this is Eleanor. We make up the Reconnected and specifically Reconnected Parenting, which is how we got started.
Yep. We founded
I
Reconnected Parenting just over 3 years ago. And since then, we've taken over 7,000 people, parents, through our paid programs, more than 50,000 through our free offerings. And we have a thriving Instagram community full of parents who are really trying to raise their children um, in ways that help their kids feel seen, heard, valued, respected for exactly who they are. And part of what we're doing is um, creating an impact so that we we want to impact 1 million children feeling raising being raised connected to that aspect of themselves. And it's
Yes.
so beautiful how many parents resonate with what we're doing. It's been an incredible few years.
Yeah. So between us, we have 9 children,
Soon to be
uh,
10.
soon to be 10. And it spans all the way from my children who are younger years and a not yet born newborn, and all the way up into the early adulthood in Eleanor's children. So
Isn't that
we
amazing?
have,
At the moment, we have literally from newborn to almost 20, almost born to almost 20.
I know it's
The
wild, isn't
full
it?
span of childhood. So good.
So, something that we also have in common is that we are both breath workers, and breath work is really at the helm of Reconnected, as well as a particular play therapy model that we have coined connected play. This is very specific to reconnected parenting, and it is, yeah, really just an alchemy of both breath and play that we allow families to come into a harmonious union together. We're also both very much aligned with conscious parenting. And sometimes conscious parenting can mean getting really real about the difficult stuff in life. And it's not just the whimsical, idea of having,
Mm.
a blessed life and that
Hmm.
everything is easy and spiritual. And, often when we come into states of awareness and we're trying to be more conscious, it really highlights the less conscious aspects that are around us.
Mm.
And so this is going to be really fun to go into this because I've definitely had the journey with my own parenting where I had to break the mold and I had to be somewhat of a pioneer in my own journey because I didn't have many people to lean on or to look at as expanders in this type of parenting. I just knew when I fell pregnant, something happened to me. I don't know what it was. It was something internally mystical that said to me, I want to do things different. But I really had no idea what different looks like. I just fell upon some books. I fell upon some conversations with local people in the community that highlighted to me, wow, yes, I really want to do things differently. So that's where my journey really started. And, it felt very lonely for the first few years of my children's life.
Mm.
And I did feel like I was butting up against a whole lot of resistance from people around me.
Mm.
At one point, I was actually living with my in-laws just when I had my second baby.
Wow.
And I can tell you, it was rough. It was so rough, only because I went straight into the belly of the beast of living in their lifestyle.
Mm.
And so when I'm trying to bring in this new level of how I would prefer things to be, that's a very hard place to start, is by literally living in their house.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Like it was almost impossible. But I want to give you the hope that things can change.
Yeah.
And we're looking, my eldest is 9 years old now, and my in-laws are completely different people.
Mm.
Something has changed for them, and I don't know exactly what it is. I've tried to ask, but they don't really know either. But they're just so much more aware and willing
Mm.
to be that more awakened, conscious person in my children's life. Like,
How did you deal with it when they weren't, for example?
oh God, sometimes it was just shocker. Sometimes it meant actually having a fight about things, or
Mm.
trying to control things, or just being generally resentful,
Mm.
feeling like I can't believe I have to do this, projecting it at my partner like it's your fault.
Yes, yes, yes. Control your parents.
Yeah, control your parents, get them, on my
Get
side.
them on board. Yeah.
And one of the funny things was, is I started to implement certain rules. So I very
So
much,
you didn't have it wasn't for you that your partner was not on board. It was more of like the in-laws
yeah.
thing.
So
And
my
because
partner is very good at, he really trusts me and where I'm moving towards. And sometimes he's like, oh, really? Like, is that like a whole new thing that you're bringing in? But he's like, okay, I'll go with it. But it was more just like our extended family. And I'm not just pinning it on my in-laws. It was my parents as well. It was like my extended family, my siblings. There was really no one around me who was had the same level of,
is it values?
yeah, values that I had, or like,
Mm,
they didn't have these standards that I was pitching everyone up against.
yeah.
Um,
And what kind of things are important to you?
So I really resonate with the lack of wanting plastic toys. I
Mm,
noticed that vibrationally in my house, I felt more frayed around plastic toys.
mm,
They didn't harmoniously kind of fit in with my aesthetic eye. I didn't
yeah.
enjoy the frequency of them. I hated the sound.
Mm,
They often make ridiculous sounds and are intense. Food was another one. I wanted my kids to be fully vegetarian and healthy.
mm-hmm.
And also TV. I wanted them to kind of watch just certain particular shows and only at specific moments.
Times. Yeah.
Um, and because obviously I think you rely on that kind of community, and I was hoping that my extended family would kind of step in as help, I realized, oh my goodness, when they go there, they're eating really bizarre, sugary things.
Mm,
They're generally being sat in front of the TV
yeah.
6 to 7 hours out of the day.
Yeah.
And when I would pick them up, they'd have a new plastic toy. Or for
Yeah.
Christmas, we would get about 20 different types of toys.
Mm,
So it just was this real kind of push up against my belief system, and was quite triggering. And I felt like I was not being valued or listened to. And I was generally just kind of the crazy mum.
mm. Yeah, there's this really, I think, deep feeling of like disrespected
Yeah.
as disrespected as the mother, I was going to say, but it doesn't really matter what role you identify with. It's just that
Yeah. Being
disrespected
disrespected.
as the guide for the children, and that you have a
Yes.
knowing about what the kids need, and then you're disrespected for that.
Yeah.
Mm,
And it feels like there's an undermining too. Like, I think grandparents kind of get away with that, they're the fun one. Like, they're the
mm,
one who gives them the cookies
mhm.
and puts them in front of the TV and buys them all the plastic stuff.
Yeah.
So I started to do funny kind of boundaries where I was like, okay, because nothing was being kind of held or revered, in the sense of, I would say no plastic toys and they would get plastic toys. So I flipped it and I said, all right, you can buy plastic toys, but they stay.
They stay at your house, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, if you buy plastic toys, they stay at your house.
Mm,
And then when it came time to coming home and they would pile the plastic toys into my car, I'd be like, no, remember, we had the rule, plastic toys stay at your house. That so quickly shifted things because they were like,
mm.
wait a minute, we do not want this giant plastic castle of, such and such.
Yep.
So it started to be this kind of fun play around, all right, well, how can I put my boundaries in? And
Yeah.
how can I get things kind of really actually listened to?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it really came down to actually intention and letting go of a lot of expectations.
Mm,
So I never would have given much hope that they could change.
mm,
I didn't have much hope that they could change. I kind of thought we were up against that for ages. but something just happened and I don't know what it was. I don't know whether it's just because I continued to parent in the way that I do. And so therefore they saw how good my children were, how blessed they were, how,
Mhm.
integrated they are.
Mm.
They started to witness, oh, when they come here, they're very calm, cool, collected. And then, by the end of the time, they're so wired on screens and sugars and plastic that they're like, kind of losing it and stuff.
Yep, yep, yep. Yeah.
So everything just started to change. And we're
The
in such a different space now. Like,
mm. And the answer was just gradually putting in boundaries and staying in your own lane and
yeah.
persevering. Yeah.
Yeah. And being really compassionate too about not making everything into a fight, not slipping into that resentment.
Mm.
Also witnessing how much love there was in the space.
Mm.
Because there was actually so much love. And I think I had completely ignored that aspect of it
Mhm.
because I was so annoyed about the lack of consciousness
Yeah.
that was there that I forgot, oh, wow, actually, they deeply love their grandchildren.
Yeah. And
They
vice
just
versa
show it in very different ways,
ways.
you know?
Yeah. So seeing the intention behind the behavior. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's so interesting because my experience is like pretty much the opposite in a lot of ways. My parents were hippies, really young when I was born, in their 20s, early 20s, hippies. And my mum was probably one of the original crunchy mums. Like she used to go and she used to catch a train and a bus to get the organic baby stuff, you know? She often tells the story of when I was born at the hospital, but when I was born, she wanted to have me inside the room with her, but she had to like really advocate for herself with the nurses because at the time they still had those nurseries. So the babies were just put in like that big room behind the glass screen with just one or two nurses in there. Oh, I've had some really big rebirths around that recently. But, it's like she was conscious of attachment. She was conscious of, the kind of foods I ate. I grew up with no TV, health food only. Mum always tells this story of maybe when I was about 8, I went to the neighbor's birthday party and it was at McDonald's. And I came back, she said, my eyes were like saucers. And I came back and I said, Mum, I had black wine. I had black wine today. I didn't even know what any of this stuff was. I had no clue. I was completely disconnected from
And just for reference, she didn't have black wine. She's talking about
I had
Coke, I'm
Coke.
assuming.
I had Coca-Cola. I just didn't know what it was. I had no clue. Um, and so, we grew up with carob at Easter instead of chocolate and bilbies instead of rabbits because they're Australian and, all the kind of alternative counterculture stuff. And no TV, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, I didn't necessarily go through a rebellion against that as a teenager, but I definitely experienced this feeling of always being outside of the usual culture. I went to a public school. There weren't really many other people who were being kind of as strictly, I felt like I just was parented by strict parents. But when my kids were born, I found almost instantly just falling, right back into the same way that I was parented on that level. Um, my when my kids were born, I had a big friendship group and they all parented, I would say relatively mainstream, bottle feeding, hospital birthing. Do you remember Ricky Lake? Ricky Lake on the TV all day, Jerry Springer on the
Oh,
TV all day.
goodness.
Like babies, toddlers, telly, outside, just, yeah, it felt like a real fray, and it grated me. So when my children were born, it's like, what happened to me was, like, I resonated when you said it's lonely. It was like I just could not be in that environment anymore with my children. I just couldn't. I couldn't. I didn't want them around the plastic. I didn't want them around the toxic sound of the television. I didn't want them around all that artificial light. It felt so abrasive. And it actually, for me, catalyzed this whole moving away from everyone who I was friends with, and into looking for people who parented the same way that I did. So, when I never kind of had that within my own family, everyone knew that I was into wooden toys and the Steiner things, and that not to give the kids healthy food, to offer them fruit, blah, blah, blah. I never had to push against any of that within my own family, but it was like I went through probably a year of not really having any social connections that had where I felt like I could be myself and not be constantly stressing, because it was really I think probably the thing about when you're first a parent, I found parenting out anyone who was parenting outside of my values, I found it really stressful to be around.
It is really stressful, and I think it really takes us out of our heart, and it cuts connection. It
Yeah.
wants us to cut connection, where it's just like, I need to get rid of these people, even if they're my parents.
It feels a bit like that. It's like,
Yeah.
you're watching your kids and they're being fed with poisons, and it's like, I really can't do that, you know?
Or you're having your life dictated to you, like, you're wanting to more gently hold limits and have discussions with your children, and then you have
Yeah.
this back voice saying, they're being completely spoiled, you need to be doing this, blah 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 blah,
Mm.
da 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 da. And it can start all the way back at when you're pregnant, you
Well,
know.
for me, it became this thing where I started just going from to parent group to parent group to parent group. Like when my kids were little, that I didn't even have a mobile phone.
Yeah,
You couldn't just kind of tap into community. So I had to literally,
physically go
search
there.
and physically look for people to connect with. So I tried a lot of different parenting groups. And I remember one day getting to one, and the topic of discussion was like about smacking. And I was like, why is this a topic? Like, isn't, like, the research is out, guys. Like, it's not a topic for conversation. Like, smacking is not a vibe. So, I was just searching and searching and searching, and just could not find the people who I resonated with.
Yeah.
And then one day I found a flyer um in, a library or whatever, and it just said the natural parenting group, and I went, and I remember instantly just feeling this huge wave of relief. I could tell, the parents there were speaking to their kids with respect. There was just watermelon on the table. There was, and it just felt so much more uh aligned with, how I want how I wanted my kids to experience the world. And it's interesting, like, I've 20-year-olds now, and one of the things I think that happens majorly over time is that they say with your first kid you're really strict, and then with your second you're a bit less, and then by the time you've
Oh
got your
yeah.
fourth, their first food is one of my I think my can't remember if it was my third or fourth child, but one of them, their first food was that they accidentally got a piece of, like, Anzac biscuit and peanut butter off the
Oh
floor,
yeah. I remember looking around with Atlas. It was like all organic, all perfect, everything.
Nissa's first food was the organic pear in the muslin, pure in the little sucky thing. It's
No, I
totally
know.
perfect.
I remember turning around in the chair when I'd had Soul and Atlas was 2, and Atlas is feeding Soul hot chips. And then I remember like his first food was like hot chips because, I was oblivious at the
Yeah.
time that Atlas was doing that.
Yeah.
And then I'm pretty sure with Bloom, because I then had 3 toddlers, I had a
Yeah.
3-year-old, a 1-year-old, and a baby,
Yeah.
that she got something absolutely ridiculous, like a lollipop or something,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I would have had a heart attack with Atlas. I was so into like the perfection, and I had really high standards, like
Yeah.
really, really high standards.
Yeah, yeah. So I can really relate when we see people in the Reconnected and they are in their first few years of the parenting journey, or even the first 10 years,
Yeah.
and there's a real passion and a real alignment, like a real needing to be aligned with values for them,
Yeah.
and I can totally relate.
Yeah.
And I think on a lot of levels, for me, when I look back, it was so important for me to find myself and who I was separate
Yeah.
from, and for friendships to change. When you become a parent, you're you you're unrecognizable. You kind
Oh
of, you go
yeah.
into this portal and you come out another person, and no one really prepares you for the level of transformation that you go through. And so many things around your kids feel completely non-negotiable. And then you know, I think the thing that's really hard is when they are relationships, like in friendship groups, it's one thing, and finding new friends can take time, but it does happen. Whereas, when it's our partner or
Or our ex-partner, and we have to do 1 week on, 1 week off.
it can be so challenging to,
So challenging and right up in your face on a
yeah.
regular basis. Yeah.
And also, people who really do have a right to influence your children, a right within their own relationship with the kids.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I think probably the thing that we see most with parents is, um, if there is no communication, no poor communication or no communication between you and the other parent. So I'd say probably the hardest relationships where there's conflict around values is your partner, ex-partner, like the other parent, basically, the other parent of the child,
Yeah.
and then grandparents and extended family,
Family.
people who are in your child's life,
Yeah.
and
Pretty permanently.
pretty permanently, and moving relationships or just evolving naturally into
Yeah.
more aligned relationships is not really an option. So there's this sense of, there's the passion, but there's the stuckness. And I think probably the most challenging thing is when there is animosity or lack of communication or animosity, and the difference in values is
Yeah.
used.
Against each other. Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of becomes the meeting point for a lot of other resentments and frustrations.
Yes.
It's like, it's not really about actually, I'm remembering a story. So for a long time, when I was in uni, I worked for an organization over here, and part of my role was helping parents at the changeover time. So parents who couldn't see each other, one parent would drop off their child, I would be with the child, they would leave, the next parent would come. And there were families where, the child would have to get completely undressed and redressed because the clothing couldn't go between the two houses. And you see these poor children absolutely stuck in the middle of this epic amount of conflict. And it's like, it's never really about the shoes. It's never really about the toys, the this, the that. In those circumstances, you can sense and you can feel, it's like, it's all the anger and upset between the parents being expressed through all of these micro details. And so I think for for probably probably a lot of what happens for parents in the Reconnected or parents in the Reconnected community is they tend to our community tends to be pretty conscious, pretty self-aware, aiming for gentle parenting, but sometimes really stuck or conscious relating in general, but sometimes really stuck in these dynamics like um with people who might not be necessarily playing on the same rules, and stuck in a lot of these frameworks. And it's important, I guess, to number one, think about like really center the child in that circumstance. I think sometimes when I look back, there was a lot over the years that I probably didn't need to hold so tight onto, you know? So when my kids were, this is maybe a bit of a different example, but, you know, when I first started going to playgroups, I'd take a lot of time monitoring what my kids were eating on the shared food table, wanting them to have this and not that and that and not this and blah, blah, blah. And when I look back, I think, well, it probably would have been actually a lot easier for them to just feel included and just be able to have whatever they had.
Yeah.
You look back with wisdom and go, oh, I could have actually been a little bit um, uh, less tight, less rigid in in some of those moments.
I live in, a really hippie shire. And I see it so many times is that like for the birthday, there's like 3 different cakes for the children who like there's one that's gluten-free, there's one that's blah, blah, blah. And
Mm,
there's instead of it being like this kind of joyous occasion where everyone just gets to share and join in cake, it becomes this really stressful,
mm.
sorry, you can't have that. You can have this one, but you can't have that. Oh, look, I've brought my own cake. Like
Oh,
it's
I was, as a
uh
child, I was the worst. So I would go to parties and my parents weren't there, and I would literally sit at the
the
lolly table and I
table.
wouldn't socialize because it was my chance to get the
Yes.
food that I was so intrigued by because it was such a, you can't have that, you don't buy that, we don't
Yeah.
even look at that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of energy around deterring me from even going anywhere near food like that. So of course I was fascinated by it.
No, totally. So I've had a real shift in experience also with my kids. So when I started out with Atlas, I had much more these really high standards that I expected everyone to pivot towards. It created a lot of stress. It made Atlas wary of me because he was like, don't show mum because she'll go off.
Yeah.
And so what I started to do when I really got deep into my breathwork practice which really loosened me up as a human being, it made me much more free to choose in the moment. It allowed me to see from a higher perspective what was going on. I realized that I was actually being gifted this really divine opportunity that I never had as a child, which was experience and option. So
Mm.
when I was a child, we grew up on McDonald's, KFC, bad food. There was no type of conversation around health, spirituality. I was really born into a very muggle existence. Like there was no kind of higher awareness. So I had nothing to base my experiences on. And I started to realize, oh, I am being given the opportunity with my children where they get to actually experience the best of both worlds. And so, therefore, they get to really learn what is best for them. And so I started to loosen my expectations, but bring in a sense of awareness around it. So I started to reflect with Atlas, especially because the other two were a lot younger, um, how he felt after he had particular things, or if he'd spent 6 hours in front of the TV. when he was acting in particular ways that I could see made him feel really quite uncomfortable, like, especially you can see it in a child who's been in front of a TV for 6 hours. They need to get out all their energy. They're feeling chaotic. They're like, out of body. And you can sense, oh, they feel really uncomfortable. And I was able to just kind of allow Atlas to notice that within himself. So I would say, oh, you've just been watching TV for 6 hours. Like, you feel really like chaotic right now, don't you? Like, it must feel so intense. And he would start to be like, yeah, that's like, I feel so intense. Like, he would really become aware of what was happening for him. And the same with sugar. So he would become really aware, like and I would let him, I'd be like, okay, yep, you can go, you can have the cookies, you can do the thing, but, I just want you to think about how
Mm,
you're going to feel afterwards.
mm,
And sometimes he would think first and think, no, I'm not going to have that many. Other times, especially if he was around like his other cousins and things, and they're all going for it, he'd get right in on it.
mm,
And then he started to reflect, wow, yeah, I actually feel sick. I don't feel good. And I've noticed over the years, he's 9 now, or he's 9 soon. He actually has a really good sense of limits
mm,
because he's explored them within himself.
mm,
And he has I just, even yesterday, he said, oh, no, I'm not going to have that because it just doesn't actually make me feel well. And
self-regulating.
it's self-regulating, and it's like, I understand that that thing looks really fun,
Mm,
but I know that when I have it, I don't feel well. And he
yeah.
is actually a really healthy eater. He loves eating fruits and things because he knows how they make him feel. They make him feel
Mm,
energetic. They make him,
mm,
feeling like great when he's playing and stuff. Same with the other two. They're getting there as well, where they realize, this is, even it has to do with sleep now. It's like,
mm,
they prefer to go to bed when we talk about going to bed because they know that they wake up feeling ready for the day.
mm, mm,
But so instead of me controlling that aspect where they feel like they need to go out of control in order to balance my control,
mm,
when I let go of the reins a bit and I let them experience life and just experience the things around them, they have really come into a sense of their own and understanding what happens for them when they indulge like that. And
yeah.
that was definitely a lesson that I didn't get until my late 20s.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really didn't, because I didn't have option. I didn't come from the conscious option where I didn't have the bad stuff, but I just had the bad stuff and I didn't have the healthy option. So
Mm,
it took me ages to realize, wow, actually, I feel way better when I have this. This
mm.
actually makes me feel really good. I had to learn that in my adulthood.
That's what, yeah.
Yeah. Whereas I think we forget that children are actually extremely wise. And
Mm,
when we point them in the direction of how they're feeling inside their body,
mm.
they do conclusions on their own, and they do build a level of self-awareness and self-confidence that allows them to pause before they do a certain thing.
Well, there's a lot to be said for, a huge part of connected play is, especially when we start talking about limits in connected play, is about trusting the child to make the right choice. And it's probably the area where parents are the most confronted. In fact, as we're recording this, we're in kind of the beginning stages of a reconnected parenting program. And it's interesting just how much comes up for people before we've even started connected play, worrying about, well, my kid's going to do this, so I better set a limit now. And my kid's going to do this, so I better set a limit now. And, it's this real fear, I guess, that of the way that our kids are going to react, for one, but it also implies a lack of self-trust, a lack of trust that you will know how to manage it if and when they do. and a lack of trust in our children to make the right choices. And the children actually do need the opportunity to make the right
Yes,
choices.
because it's going to come anyway. That experience of testing the waters of life
Mm,
is going to come. It's going to
mm,
come when they leave the house. It's
mm.
going to come, when they move into a career of, that they're working outside of the home.
Well, it
Um,
comes all over the place,
yeah, it's going to come when they go to the other parent's house.
yeah.
It's going to come when
Actually,
they go to the grandparent's house.
I want to go back to the issue of two parents in conflict. So the first point I wanted to highlight was just this reality that it's really important to check in. You know, we were talking before about um, sometimes your parenting values and the way you want things done can become really loaded energetically with things that are unrelated to that topic. So, you know, you've got general upset with the other parent, and then it gets projected onto, you know, not wanting the kids to watch TV at their house, or annoyance with the way that they are spoken to and things like this. And of course, they're important topics, but it's really important to first of all notice, like, how much are you loading up those moments with your own upset from the relationship, lack of resolve. And same with grandparents, same kind of thing. You know, if we have had to swallow a lot of resentments over time, a lot of tension can get put onto small moments, like then, you know, them buying plastic or them eating sugar
Yeah.
or blah blah blah. So first thing is to just be really aware of what is actually happening, what is being loaded into that moment, and are
Yeah.
you current? We have a saying at Reconnected where it's like, ideally in life, we're emotionally current with people. We're not ha- we're not building up a lot of resentment. We're staying current emotionally, so that when we're in the moment about like a toy or some sugar or blah blah blah, you know, or the way that a child's being spoken to or a parenting practice, we're actually um, current emotionally. So we're, what's the word? We're in, our reaction is in context to what's actually happening, and then we're able to have, you know, proper conversations about things.
Yeah, and we know that we're in context when we are able to come at it from a place of non-shaming, non-judgment, not having to raise our voice. We can have a kind of centered conversation. We can really talk out our values
Mm,
in a way in which they're heard, instead
mm,
of feeling like we need to cut connection, take the kids away,
yeah.
block any sort of interaction. That's when we know that we are really current and that we're
Mm.
not actually loading in past resentments.
And the other aspect I wanted to really talk to is this element of judgment. So there's a, no, I think it was Rudolf Steiner actually. You know, one of the first spiritual books I read was one of a Steiner book, and one of the first things he talks about is um, for every step towards consciousness, say the essence of it is for every step towards awakening. So every time you become aware spiritually or emotionally, etc., you need to take just as many steps. He uses the word moral on a moral development. And what it means is, you know, we have to be really careful not to think we're better than other people.
Yeah. No, it's really, really important. And also asking yourself the question, am I open to the possibility that things can be different? Am I open to the possibility that they can listen to me? Am I open to the possibility that they are open to the possibility of
Mm,
change? It's like really checking in with yourself, whether you have completely pinned those people as never, ever going to change. They're never going to change. You
mm,
don't give them any freedom to step into a new archetype.
mm,
Because from my experience, there is so much possibility in people changing. There is so much possibility in things becoming very different, as long as you are open to that possibility and you continue to walk the path that you know is right for yourself, because eventually it starts to make itself very apparent that it works.
It's also super, super, super not gonna that is not gonna happen for someone else when we relate to them from the perspective, however subtle, that we feel superior to them because of our values or our choices.
Yes.
When we hold ourselves in relationship to someone else with that feeling, we will naturally get a whole lot of resistance from that person
Yeah.
because it doesn't feel good to be around judgment, even if you feel like you are hiding that judgment. If it's there, the other person will energetically pick up on it and respond to the truth of your full communication, not to the nice words that you're saying, etc. And
Yeah.
so, you know, it's humbling, but it's a really important thing to tune in on. And it doesn't mean you can't hold on to your values. It's just how are you perceiving this other person? And if they are not responding to you, if they're not able to say, oh, yeah, I can see why you um, don't want to feed them that particular food, I'm happy to come overboard. One of the things you can check in on is there judgment between me and this other person? Because if you can do the work of diffusing the judgment, then you can come from a place where you're actually having a conversation and it's not a I'm right, you're wrong, and I need to either fix you or you need to come around to my perspective. And my perspective's the only perspective. If we try and have a conversation in that vein, it tends to just be an argument. Whereas if we can have a conversation where we genuinely are not judging the other person for their valid experience and perception of the situation, then we're in a proper conversation where um, we can actually, come to a place where we see each other's point of view. And you'd be fascinated probably how many conversations can go well when we simply do the work of cleaning up from our side any judgment that we're feeling.
Yeah. So the key kind of method that we use in reconnected parenting and our work at the Reconnected is working with intention. So it's really about getting very clear with how you would prefer things to be. And instead of thinking of all the ways in which you don't want things to be, and you can't stand this and you can't stand that, we're really looking at how would I prefer things to be? How would I prefer things to be with this person who I'm having this conflict with around parenting consciously with my children? So I implore you to sit down for a moment and just really write out how you would prefer things to be. Get really clear about it. So write a list of things that you would love to see happen for this person or in this situation with your children, and really give yourself permission to dream big. I'll just use an example. Say the most difficult one of being in a broken relationship and you're dealing with a ex-partner and your children have to go there, like the way that they parent. Throw out all of what you don't want for a moment and just give the open to possibilities scenario of, oh, I would really love that we come to a resolution around parenting, that we can find harmony in the way that we parent. I want to pick my children up from their other parents' house and have them come back and tell me all of the cool things that they've done, and just really, really dream into it and give yourself permission to really anchor in a future that you really want for yourself and your children
This
and
will
your
be a really
relationship.
This will be a really profound thing if you're a part of one of the Reconnected programs to use as an intention for a breathwork session.
Yeah. So I was going to say that is that so in reconnected parenting, what we do from that moment is once we've set intentions about how we would prefer things to be, then we're able to breathe on it. And if you have done any of our free classes or if you're in our community, you know that our breath holds the signature of all of our stored stress responses in life. So the breath really allows you to pick up and process those energetic judgments, those feelings of resentment, and helps you process them in a way in which you free yourself up to be way more current with your feelings. So it's a really, really powerful, powerful practice. But we're going to leave you with the process of setting intentions for how you would prefer them to be. And just leave that list sitting around, put it in a drawer, put it on your dresser. If you have to hide it from people, you can,
Yeah.
whatever. Just allow yourself to really dream into the bigger picture, write it all down, and then just let it go and allow these things to come into fruition. I know that it can sound a bit like woo woo and how is it going to work, but just trust.
Well, it's really important. It's like, how can we get where we want to be if we don't know where we're going? It's
Yeah.
actually
How
just
can
as
we
simple as that. Yeah.
totally?
Yeah. There's one thing I'd love to leave you guys with, and it's related to some of the research around resilience in children. They did this incredible study. It was one of the biggest longitudinal studies. So they followed children from childhood right through to adulthood, kids who were really up against a lot of, challenges and difficulties. And then once they were adults, they had a look at which children were thriving and which children had followed, which children were still struggling as adults. And they found that the one thing that distinguished children who thrived from children who were still in survival was that those thriving children had one person who really saw them for who they were. And so it's actually not essential for our kids to be surrounded only by people who see them for who they are, who are consciously parenting, who are gentle parenting, etc. But what is essential is that there is the one person. So even if sometimes it feels like you're up against the judgment of partners, the judgment of society, a lot of gentle parenting. We are up against old ways of parenting that I think will probably die out eventually because they're not even based on basic respect for children or, any kind of attachment science or anything, but still are really predominant. Like children should give parents respect, whether the parents respect the child or not, etc. That kind of old school paradigm. Even if they only have you, that is the one most important thing. And this has been proven in science over and over and over again. So even if you feel like you're up against a lot, what you're giving to your children is so much. We only need one person to see us for who we really are, to have an anchor point for that. And it gives your child the resilience and the awareness to be able to see more clearly the other paradigms that they're living within.
Yes, it's really important awareness to have because it's realistic to life, right? We don't walk out into the world and have everyone understand us. There's a whole gamut of possibilities out there. So it's been really good talking to this because we do have so many people that reach out to us and say, oh my goodness, I don't know what to do. I have this person in my life. I have that person in my life. It's not easy. And this is just a real affirmation to keep moving in the direction of your intentions and how you would prefer things to be. Stay open to the possibility. Dive deep into your own spiritual process, lessen your judgment, free yourself up energetically, and be that person in your child's life who really sees them for who they are and what they deserve. And check in around where can you let go of some of the expectations and control, and trust that your child, who is a intelligent, incredibly cosmic little human being, will make the right decisions if they're given an expansive choice, that you are giving them a really good lesson in trusting themselves and their own intuition. So we're going to leave you here, and
We'll see you in some other program, we hope.
yeah, we're going to
Yeah.
see you sometime soon. Thanks so much, everyone.